So we like to, with Dark Sky Week, we always like to bring people around to different communities. It's more of a community hosted event. And under normal circumstances, we will be transferring you from one location in Mayo to another. We'd be experiencing different themes, all connected to dark skies. So tonight we are virtually joining Clare, Ireland, and we're going to be welcomed by Brendan Tobin, who's the Clare Island Development Officer, and also PJ Rankin, who's a local astrophotographer. Between Brendan and PJ, they will be hosting the evening for us and introducing our main guests of the evening, which are the art collective Lumen, who are also on the panel here, which you can probably see now. So just before I hand over to Brendan and to PJ, I just want to see if we can share the results of our Menti screen. So just bear with me 1 second while I get the right screen up. Oh gosh, we've got people from all over the place at the moment. That's great. So let's share this and see where you are all from. Okay, so we've got a great number from Dublin. So welcome, Dublin, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for supporting us. We have people from Liverpool, we have Kilkenny, we have Drogheda, we have Ballina, we have Hackney in London, my neck of the woods. Hello, Hackney. With Portugal, with New York again, great. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I will just move to one next slide and ask you another question. Now, hopefully this will work in our Menti. Just 1 second. Now I'm going to ask you another question. So those of you that have used Menti, if you can pop in how you have a connection to Clare Island, if you have a connection to Clare Island. So we've only a couple of people that voted so far. A lot of people have visited, so only one person so far who lives in Clare Island, but thank you for having us. And we've quite a few people that hope to visit, so that's a lovely result to look at. With more people who haven't visited yet, so they're people to join Clare Island in the future, and that's great, and 9 that have visited. So what I'll do is leave that open so we can have a look at it later in the evening, and I will now hand over to our hosts for the evening. So that is Brendan Tobin. So Brendan, I'm going to pop you in the spotlight, and PJ will join in a few minutes, so I will let you take over the evening, Brendan, and thank you again for having us.
Thanks very much, Georgia, and welcome to everybody. Kate Mila. And really, it's a real pleasure for us here to have the opportunity to do this. Cora Keating, who was here prior to I came out here a year ago. Cora was for a long time looking forward to getting us involved in this, and it's a great place for dark skies. You know, they're in abundance out here, and we'd like to make you very welcome if you'd like to come and check out our dark skies. We're very pleased to be part of this, and just maybe a couple of little things there on, I'd like to give you a little sort of view of Clare Island in, excuse me here, as I throw up this, there's just a few slides here, and yeah, many of you know the Soul Doctor song was going to Meet Me on Clare Island. Well, we hope to meet you out here. And this is a picture of Clare Island taken from Inishturk. And we out here, we've got great dark skies, we've got brilliant landscapes and heritage. And best of all is the way of life. I threw on a few photos here. There's amazing things out here. This is where the sea meets behind the island with Crow Patrick in the background. And it just comes up into this immense, wave splashing up out in the sea and then rips on into the island. It's an amazing place for taking photos. There's great heritage here. Of course, it's like sort of, the stronghold of Grania Whale, who sailed up the Thames to meet Queen Elizabeth. to secure the release of her son, and it's here. And the island is dotted with heritage. There's a Cistercian abbey as well, megalithic tombs, and one of the most amazing things here is the landscapes just covered in what they call the lazy beds of the back from the sort of famine times, and so there's a lot of history out here. But it's a photographer's delight. Absolutely. Standing up on Knocknaveen, looking out around, you can do 360 degrees, and you can see from the tip of Achill there, now you can see it with the orange sky behind it, all the way around. And on the left, we have one of PJ's photos, which I just dark skies, and he's going to take you further into that coming along. We have here too as well, we've gone digital. Actually, we're broadcasting here from our new digital hub on the island, where we've got high-speed broadband for those remote workers. We're up there. We may not have all the advertisements they have for Aaron Moore, but we've got the technology. So for anybody who wants to get out here, take your photographs and then send them around the world, this is the place to be. And we've got, like, you can sit anywhere around here. You can actually sit outside and have a pint. And with high-speed broadband. So you'll be all very welcome. Where am I now? It's gone all over me here. I'm sorry, I'm shooting around the technology. Oh yeah, this time, last year, this is our world famous Scarecrow Competition. And it's held just before the Dark Skies Festival. And we'll be hoping to do it again this year. And so come on out for Halloween, meet us for Halloween on Clare Island, and we'll take you walk in the dark skies, and we'll see it. If you survive the night, we'll bring you back for loads of crack. So that's about Ashford and Gorgeous. You can't go wrong out here. Only place to be during COVID. Sorry about this, but it's like just the only place to be. You can walk for hours, see nobody, and you don't have to put the mask on. No need for a muzzle. It's great. Anyway, but that's not what I came to talk about. Came to talk about the draft. That's another thing. That will go over most of your heads. But if anybody remembers Alice's Restaurant, it came to talk about Alice in the restaurant. We wanted to get this started off, and we went to St. Patrick's National School, and we went up and we filmed the kids, and obviously we had to do it during the day, but we also, because of COVID, we had to do it outside. And it was lovely. When I was there talking to the children, they said that one of the great things about school and coming back to school is they didn't have to sit in the front of a screen all day. Oh, wow. They really wanted to get back. What they actually meant is they didn't want to have to sit in front of their iPad or computer doing schoolwork. They didn't actually mean they didn't want to watch TV, but we got that out of them. But anyway, some of these kids, these are the youngest children in the school, and they had done a little bit of work on this. Forgive the noise of the wind, but let's just hear what they have to say about dark skies and why it's important.
Counting them. No!
Did you ever try to count the stars?
No, it's too many to count. You'd have to go across the whole world.
What do you think?
Half the world.
Do you think you could count all the stars in the sky?
No. I got stars in there.
Yeah, beautiful.
I have the solar system with all the planets and stars. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe astrotourism would be people coming to a place where the sky is very dark at night, so they could see all the stars. Because if you live in a city,
you can't see anything.
You can't. Why?
Because there's too many lights.
There's too many lights. And what does that cause?
Like not getting...
Light pollution. Yeah. Yeah, what I want to do is to find out the constellation that's related to your
I think less
yeah, but can you find out and look up on the internet or whatever and find out what the stars are that represent? Yeah? want to try that? And then you can sort of do a picture of it. Huh? Huh? And bring it back into the school. Did you do some pictures?
Yes.
Did you already? Yeah.
No.
Where's the minor? Okay, that's the small bear. Yeah. The little flower. And we got Aquarius. Wow, that's brilliant. I had no idea that you'd done this. That's just classic. You're just so far ahead of me. So we got two fun areas. Yeah? And wow. No. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye.
Well, as you can see, the kids were enthusiastic but cold, and I obviously have a lot to learn about filming. But that said, we have somebody here who's much more qualified than I in this, and that's PJ Rankin, who's PJ is a local boy who's got a wonderful, I came across his work when I first came out to the island. I was talking to my brother one day and he says, have you seen this website? And it was a drop in the ocean. And I took a look at it and I thought, wow, that really is amazing. And I said, I've got to meet this guy. And a few days later, I got a phone call out of the blue from this guy, PJ Rankin, to say, hey, listen, can I give you a hand with the website? And I'd been looking, I was thinking, you know, I was going to go to him and sort of see, could I like catch a couple of photos off him for our website? But he came on, and not only did he offer us a photos, he actually did up the website for the community here, whatever, recently. And great photographer and a real benefit to the island. And so I'm going to hand over to PJ now. PJ.
Well, thank you for the very kind words, Brendan. A bit of a glowing review there. Yeah, so basically, you know, I'm more trying to kind of give a bit of a rough breakdown, really, of, I suppose, Clare Island's, you know, benefit of actually being in such a minimally light polluted area. Like my kind of photography journey kind of started back just kind of from growing up, really. The landscape of the place itself effectively inspired my sort of kind of long-term interest in landscape photography. And then probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I kind of started my interest in the astrophotography side of things, and purely because of Clare Island's incredibly clear night skies. So I'm going to be just giving you guys a quick kind of overview, really, of kind of, I suppose, the what do you call it, the pros and the cons of kind of light pollution and how they can affect the place. But I'm going to start with giving a short little kind of view of the harbor area, one of my images here. So as you can see here, this is just kind of the bay here on Clare Island. Kind of the very iconic view of Granuail's castle there, this new enough sort of pier that kind of came to fruition back around 2005, 2006. But this particular area of the island itself would be probably classified as the most heavily light polluted area on the island. And that is specifically be attributed to all the lighting utilized for both sets of piers. So the next image I'm just going to show you will be an image that I had taken right at the very start of my kind of astrophotography kind of interest, which kind of gives a bit of a breakdown, or certainly enlightened me to the problem of light pollution. And in this instance, we have a photograph of, where are we now? Photograph of Granuail Castle at night. Nothing's been changed with this image whatsoever. This is literally how it kind of came out of the camera straight away. I was exposing for the stars, and obviously due to, you know, the light pollution coming immediately off the pier over a course of a long exposure photograph, you can kind of see quite an accumulation of the light pollution on the actual structure itself. So unfortunately, there was no real way of kind of doing anything, you know, about that in a single exposure. And, you know, is a prime example of kind of what can actually occur in even somewhat you know, remote or rural areas in and around the country. And the next image of mine would have been one of the first ones I kind of took prior to really getting a grasp on the issues associated with light pollution. And that is of the Ross End. Now, this particular photograph is just right beside her. It's on the eastern side of the island, a small little kind of rocky peninsula that Brennan just showed you there, of the two waves crashing together, with Kirkpatrick in the distance, and a significant amount of light pollution emanating from Westport. Now, in this particular panorama, obviously I've been able to kind of include some of the night sky. You can just about see part of Orion's belt just here towards the east. And then down here, this kind of bright light source is Runa Harbour. So this is basically a light painted image, but other than that, no actual light pollution issues occurring in this region of the island. But obviously quite a lot of heavy light pollution kind of emanating from Westport. This again is another image directly towards the lighthouse on Clare Island, kind of past the first gate, as we like to call it. And this bright light source is the lighthouse itself, kind of illuminated kind of at nighttime. So as you can see, you know, the actual clarity of the sky above Clare Island is pretty incredible. And it's something I certainly noticed, you know, from when I was about a teenager. I'd be going up to a friend's house by the mill, and on cold winter nights when the sky is absolutely at its clearest, because there's, you know, significant reduction in kind of particulates in the atmosphere, makes the stars kind of again, kind of light pollution kind of just on the horizon there out towards kind of Achill and Achill Bay. This is one of my most recent astrophotography images. At the start of the year, prior to kind of making my way back down towards Galway, I wanted to try and get an image of the Quadrantids meteor shower, but unfortunately the moon was just coming up a little bit in tandem as the center point of the Quadrantids was rising. So I opted to try and get the little lesser known outer edges of the Milky Way in the northwest, just above Achill here. So obviously very twinkly stars. And again, just another blessing in the fact that we have such little light pollution to the area. So it really is a dream for anyone with an interest in astrophotography. Again, this kind of there in Brennan's kind of presentation slides, but an image of the Clare Island Lighthouse there. It's on the most northerly point on the island itself. So again, the only form of light that we actually have here illuminating the area is just a rising full moon. So hence you can kind of see the light kind of draping across the foreground there. Now this is in our neighboring county, Galway. This is an image that I managed to take again towards the southwest of the Milky Way itself last summer. And unfortunately, you kind of have out towards the sort of Clifton region, you know, quite heavy sort of light pollution, and that tends to kind of get exacerbated by the fact that you have any form of kind of clouds that you have in the sky. So it tends not to be as bad in the more remote areas. So like Connemara certainly has its kind of I suppose various areas of kind of, I suppose, true dark effectively, but if you're not shielded, I suppose, from the surroundings of light pollution, then it certainly can be imagery. And over towards Mayo Island, and again shows you the benefit of kind of being out as far west, but not as quite as far west as we are on Clare Island, with the lack of light pollution. So again, just facing south here, the only small little bit of, you know, light that's kind of appearing in the image is here from Slinehead Lighthouse, and that's only reflecting off the clouds as well. So yeah, so that's everything there. So again, you know, the fact that Clare Island certainly hosts incredibly dark skies, with the benefit of, you know, if you throw the winter weather into the mix as well with a clear sky, it truly is an absolute haven for being able to kind of see the night sky kind of completely unspoiled. And then the only small little bit of I suppose, pollutant, I suppose, is actually kind of leaking from the mainland. And even then, at that kind of little amount, you know, we are still kind of really blessed with what we actually have. So that's all I kind of really wanted to kind of show you guys. So I think I'll pass it back to Georgia, who will be able to kind of move things further on.
Thanks, Bori. Thanks, PJ. Yeah, no, that's really good. And I'm going to come back to you later on, because I know that you have an exhibition coming up in the lighthouse, actually, sometime later this year. But we're going to come back to PJ and to all. We're going to turn it over now to our colleagues from Lumen, Louise, Melanie, and Rebecca. And they'll have a presentation and then show us some of their work. And then we'll come back into a panel discussion, basically like sitting around in armchairs and have a chat about filming and photography and night skies. So I'll pass it over to you then, Melanie or Louise, whoever's going to chair this session, this part of the session.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight and listening to all of the wonderful presentations tonight. My name is Louise Beer, and myself, Rebecca Huxley and Melanie King are the directors of Lumen, and we're going to give you a bit of an overview of what Lumen does as a collective and also our own art practices.
So Lumen began in 2014 following myself, Louise and Rebecca meeting and wanting to make a collective specifically focused on astronomy and light. So this was the beginning of our first ever exhibition, which was at the Crypt Gallery in St Pancras, London. And we chose 30 different artists who are all working in some way with astronomy and light, and curated them all into this amazing and historic crypt gallery, which you can see the entrance to here.
So we run lots of participatory events, and one of these is called Print the Moon, which you can see some images of here. It's an event we run with an astronomer called Paul Hill, and he brings a selection of telescopes, and we were able to look with him at details on the surface of the moon. And then we help people take images with their smartphones using the telescopes and print them on Polaroid to take home. People are often really surprised about how bright the moon is. And I guess it's because we're looking at it from a dark location against a dark sky. And this is just in London. So I'm imagining how amazing it would look from Clare Island and Mayo Dark Sky Park. There's lots of different ways to take photos of the night sky, and using instant film on a smartphone is really fun. As you can see in the middle photo, there's lots of different qualities and textures to the images.
So in 2014, we found this magnificent gallery space in the crypt of St John and Bethnal Green Church. And we have been curating exhibitions, events, and special symposiums within our space here and the church upstairs. Within this space, we're really privileged to be the caretakers of two women who died of cholera in 1847, and they are buried directly in our space. And that really, having that responsibility really changed the way that we curated works in the space as well. We really like thinking about what leaps in knowledge that humanity has taken since in terms of astronomy since those women died.
So this is our first ever opening for our gallery space, and what we did here was we tried to replicate an eclipse. So we used a pin light, a wooden disc, a projection screen, and dry ice, so that as you walked through the space, you could see this beautiful column of light, but then from a certain angle in the crypt, you could see the full eclipse installation, and we were very happy about how this exhibition went. The church was also designed by an architect called Sir John Soane, who is very much interested in light and how light moves through buildings. So we're very excited about having a space within one of his only churches. And we've also curated lots of exhibitions about astronomy, one of which was called New Moon, and it was all around artworks that were focused on the new moon.
Yeah. So as Mel said, we've done lots of exhibitions in the gallery over the last few years, exploring many different themes, from black holes and quantum physics to poetry about the sky, and subjects that help us think about the ways in which we treat the Earth and the atmosphere. And this image shows an example of an exhibition called All at Sea by two artists called Maria Mack and Hannah Scott. And they told the story in the space using films and sculpture and data about shipping to try and reveal some truths about consumer culture and climate change.
In 2017, Lumen was asked to create an installation for Green Men Festival, which is a music and art festival in Wales. And at this period, during the period of the exhibition of the festival, there was a total solar eclipse that was only visible in the USA. So we created this reimagined solar eclipse in the forest at Green Man Festival, and it was made of a 2 meter in diameter disc covered in hyper-reflective fabric, and then we directed a very powerful light at the fabric, and it created this incredible luminous kind of being in the forest. One of the most beautiful parts of the installation, while it was being installed, was the discovery that behind the disc was a sort of black hole of light that was just a shadow from the disc, but it created this incredible optical illusion.
It was a really amazing challenge to kind of try and make this installation outside. This was our first outdoor installation, and we had to think about things like daylight. As you can see here, the installation was still really bright in the daylight. We had to think about things like the trees and how they move, and also about the weather, such as the wind and rain, which was quite prevalent. And as Louise said, we always, within our installations, try to replicate what's happening at the time in some way, and you'll find out more about that soon, later on in our presentation. And one thing just to say as well is that we really liked watching people's reactions to it. It became a kind of meeting place within the woods where people could sit and chat and also kind of bask in the light of our eclipse.
So this is another interpretation of the eclipse, a smaller version that we were able to make inside a space in a gallery called Vivid Projects in Birmingham. And we worked with the artists who were part of a residency group called the Black Hole Club. And we worked with them to create some works. And it was really fun trying to create the installation much smaller in this space, and also able to use a smoke machine. And we got to learn sort of something new about the installation, because when you stood in front of the lower disc, you got to be part of this amazing path of light.
Just before lockdown, we installed a piece of work at the Museum of Freemasonry in Covent Garden in central London. So earlier, I guess in 2019, we were invited to create a piece of work that responded to the long history of symbolism within the Freemasons about the night sky, and also other astronomical elements like the sun, which is obviously a star. But we got to look through the collection that they had of all of these pieces from history, and it was absolutely incredible. So this is the piece installed in the museum that was opened briefly before it was closed because of COVID.
And the installation was also dependent on the phase of the moon. So if you went during the full moon, you would see a bright illuminated disk. And if you went on a new moon, you'd see a kind of eclipse kind of vision, and then you'd see the different waxing and waning moon crescents as the month progressed. So we also were able to curate some objects as part of this installation. So we had these beautiful cabinets created and really had a lot of fun looking through the archive and choosing different objects related to the sun, moon and stars. So this is just one of the objects that we chose, but there were lots of different things like geometric glass objects, which we really enjoyed.
This is a recent exhibition we curated and organised with the Artist Expedition Society, run by Anna Dakin. And this took place in the Earth Sanctuary Reserve on Aranda Country in Australia as part of Desert Festival. And it had a selection of different artworks by artists from all over the world. And these works were created to think about what lies beyond the outer edges of the atmosphere. And it was really exciting for the artists to think about their work under a very different night sky view in the Southern Hemisphere.
So now we're all going to say a little bit about our own art practices that feed all into Lumen. So this is an image of mine called A Memory of Darkness. Using installation, moving image, photography and sound, I explore humanity's evolving understanding of Earth's environments and the cosmos. I create objects and experiences that reflect the incomprehensible nature of reality, from the ocean floor to the night sky. There are three strands to my practice: Earth, astronomy and light. Earth includes all species on Earth, framed in a deep time sense, looking at evolution and land forming, not from a human-centric time frame. Astronomy, trying to make sense of the universe through science. And light. Light is symbolic of how humanity has tried to grasp the experience of nature and space throughout history. So my work is centered around having two different experiences of the night sky. I grew up in Aotearoa, New Zealand until the age of 16, before moving to the UK, and I live in Margate in Kent, which is a very beautiful place if you haven't been here before. Most recently, I have been using live broadcasting as a tool to create shared global listening experiences. During my associateship with the Delphina Foundation and on a residency in Te Matatiki Toi Ora in Christchurch, Aotearoa, New Zealand, I recorded birdsong from a trip to Hiniwai Reserve. During my stay at Hiniwai, which is a very remote area of regenerated forest on a volcanic region called the Banks Peninsula in the South Island of New Zealand, I had a very moving experience of being under the most beautiful night sky I've ever encountered, surrounded by native bush. I was very much alone on this remote reserve and had a personally unusual experience of facing the night sky without anybody else there. There were two park rangers sleeping in a house nearby, but there was absolutely nobody else, no cell phone reception, nothing, and very little light pollution. And this is where this image was taken. So looking up into the Milky Way felt profoundly perspective shifting, and hearing the moorpork owls in the distance filled me with an intense feeling of ecological grief. From the field recordings, I made a piece that reflects the experience, to be listened to alone with your eyes covered. So I will be doing a live broadcast on Friday this week, so look out for tickets, from Mayo Dark Skies. Another project I'd like to mention is called Under the Fading Light, and this is a screenshot of the film. This piece takes two images of my long-term views of the night sky and merges them together. Throughout the piece, the soundtrack soundtrack of New Zealand birdsong depletes to a small number of species, echoing the ecological damage of light pollution as well. So continuing from these works, I'm working on photographic, sound, and installation-based projects that bring a cosmic perspective to our understanding of the importance of our natural world. And now we'll move on to Melanie.
Thank you very much, Louise. So my name is Melanie King, and I'm a visual artist and practice-based researcher at the Royal College of Art. And my main body of work at the moment is called Ancient Light, Rematerializing the Astronomical Image. And within this research, I'm really interested in how light travels for thousands, if not millions of years before reaching photosensitive film. And I'm also really interested in the materiality of the stars. So what are the stars made of, and how does that connect to us living here on Earth? So there are many things that are present in the stars that are also present on Earth, such as the calcium in our bones and teeth, but also the silver. That silver can be made in giant supernovae, and it can also be used to create the photographs that I'm making in the darkroom. So I'm on this journey looking at materiality in starlight, thinking about light traveling over these immense distances. And I'm also thinking about how to make photography more sustainable. So through learning about materiality, I've been looking at the materiality of photography in depth, and I'm now starting to use sustainable developers, such as developers that are made out of plants and things like that, instead of industrial chemicals. In addition to that, I'm also doing a project currently at the moment called Origin of Silver, which again looks at the origin of silver in the cosmos. It looks at how it's mined in the environment on Earth. And it also looks at how to reclaim that silver to make new artistic objects, such as jewelry, sculptures, and also potentially daguerreotypes, which is something that I've also tried. So we'll now pass on to Rebecca.
Hello. Please change my image, the image, Louise. Thank you. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm an artist and a researcher. And similarly to Louise and Melanie, I'm also researching and making work about darkness. One reason I've been doing this is because I'm really interested in how our feelings about darkness and light can change depending on where we are, such as in a big city like London, or in Mayo Dark Sky Park, or somewhere very far away from the equator. So in looking at darkness, I'm also really interested in artificial light at night. So artificial light at night, as we've seen from the other presentations, can come from very different sources. So street lights, stadia, advertising boards, and so on. When this is seen collectively above a place, it's known as artificial sky glow, where the light's scattered and reflected within the atmosphere and directed back towards the Earth's surface. I'm really interested in sky glow because of what it can tell us about pollution and our changing relationship with the night over time. And also as a way to understand the impact we're having, not just in our immediate space, but also in places much further away that are also under this gaze of sky glow. So the image you can see here is from my garden, the view above my garden in London during the new moon. And it's from a time lapse, and I created it using a fisheye lens. And when I started making images and films in my garden, I was really aware of the different kinds of lights around me. Car headlights, the blue ambulance flashes against the bricks of the house, the bright lights of the flats next to me illuminating the building. And then as time went on, I began to notice other kinds of lights, which seemed much more subtle and temporary, like the security lights of gardens flashing. And I realized that these were tracing the movements of foxes as they played between the gardens. And so although the light was disrupting my view of the night sky, I started to find ways, being in the city and enjoying and seeing and hearing all the life that was otherwise hidden from view during the daytime. And I previously, before lockdown, I'd found it hard to describe that artificial illumination to someone hundreds or thousands of miles away in a very different place to me, because it never really gets dark in London. So making films and recording sounds really helps to capture that experience. So now we're going to show a film called Our Night Skies, which is a film that we commissioned last year. We commissioned 18 artists, including Louise, who are based in both the northern and southern hemisphere. And we asked them to make time lapses of the night sky where they are. And we wanted to create a shared experience that we could think of as connecting us to our distant ancestors, but also connect us during lockdown when travel was restricted and we couldn't have that kind of closer contact. The film was edited by John Hooper. The film itself is 28 minutes long, and we're going to show a clip that will be 5 minutes. So we hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much for watching the presentation and the short snippet of the film.
Hey, thanks very much. That was brilliant. Oh, it was an eye-opener. Especially, I've got to admit, for me personally, the part in the Masonic Lodge. Now, there surprisingly, I used to sit across from that building. I used to work in Covent Garden. I used to sit across and I looked from my office down on that building and I always wondered what was on inside there. And now that's the first time I ever got to see it, was thanks to you. But no, I was really, really fascinating, the work that you're doing. And I was particularly taken with, you know, the link you were making between work on the environment and that idea then of the over time, this you know, light moving for so much time before getting picked up and recorded. That takes me to think of traditional knowledge and recording of knowledge. It's passed over centuries down orally, and then sort of people, you know, might sort of think of locking it down or writing it down. Yeah, London, place of my own heart. Spent a lot of time there, so that's really good. That was really interesting. And I wonder, before we go into it, Georgia, are there some questions there? Maybe Fiona might have picked up on that as well. Are there some questions that people have thrown in there?
There's a couple of, yeah, there are a couple of questions. All right, Brendan, I'll just put my video on here. So, well, actually, the first one is for yourself from Mary Curmurgeon about the visitor centre. Is the hub that you showed earlier above the visitor centre? That's for you, Brendan. That was.
Is the hub, sorry, above
the hub that you showed, is that above the visitor centre on Clare Island?
Well, it's in the community centre. It's in the upper part of the community centre, and it'll be open very soon. And we'll you know, get in contact with us. You want to do remote working? Huh?
I think you might have a volunteer. So we have a question from Jed. Rebecca, have you identified different cultural outlooks of the night sky between people living in urban areas versus the rural communities?
Good question. So far, yes. I'd originally done some research and was meant to go on a residency in northern Finland, and had been talking to some members of the community there already. And yeah, definitely the sort of there's definitely evident cultural differences in the way in which you know, your sort of like all your everyday life is sort of shaped around the amount of light you have or amount of sort of darkness you experience. So so far, yes.
And it's interesting at the moment. I noticed there's Dark Sky London and there's some people from London joining us as well. So even in an urban area, very urban area, you can make some changes and improve things. So that's great. Another question in the chat box is, have Lumen any plans to exhibit in Ireland? And two people have upvoted that question, so let's hear it. What's the answer?
We would love to, definitely. I was really fortunate to be able to go, as well as Melanie, to Mayo Dark Sky Park for the festival and symposium, and I've been really longing to come back ever since that moment in November 2019.
Well, likewise, we'd be glad to have you, and there's plenty of space for exhibits, so we'll talk to you about that another time. So thank you. And I'm just going to have a look in the chat box as well. So there's a couple of comments I might just read to you. Daria Blackwell, a long time ago, I had a business trip to New Zealand. I had no idea that I knew what the northern sky looked like, as I had not studied it. But when I looked up in New Zealand, I was completely disorientated. No Big Dipper, instead the Southern Cross, which I had no idea I'd recognize. It was a fascinating experience. So yeah, Louise, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, my whole practice really is inspired by the change in my experience of the night sky. And I remember growing up in New Zealand and visiting these very remote mountainous areas and looking out into the night sky, completely assuming that everybody else in the world was also looking out into the same like star-filled, amazing night sky. And it was completely shocking to me, like fundamentally shocking, that people don't share that same experience across, you know, huge parts of the world. So yeah, it's I think it has a huge effect on well, it had a huge effect on me, and having the change made me realize, you know, made me think about the importance of natural darkness as well. And when I go back to New Zealand, I really love seeing the Southern Cross and the familiar stars that I grew up looking at as well. So yeah, I guess it's two night skies to get to know. So that's a nice part of it.
And could it be a question of, you know, you don't know what's so special until you're away from it, and then that's when you really appreciate it. So it's that age old, you know, we have to recognize and experience something to care about it and to protect it. I think that's very true with the night sky.
Absolutely.
I spent a lot of time in Australia myself, and over many years, and it always took me, you know, that was where I first think I really noticed the night skies. It's quite interesting. I was living in Brisbane just recently, and I noticed, you know, even in the cities, on the streets, they don't have so many streetlights. It's sort of thing, and so I really picked up on that. And when I came here, I moved to Clare Island a year ago. I came out here, and you know, on one of those winter nights, and I looked out, and I suddenly thought, wow, you know, it's here. I mean, it really caught me. And then when I heard, you know, the Dark Skies program, whatever, it all made sense. It all made sense, you know, like there's this wonderful gift which is there for us all the time, and we're missing it because we're looking, you know, it's like the kids say they were tired of looking at screens. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
There's one thing I put in the chat box. Our motto for Mayo Dark Skies is let's help children to name more stars in the sky than stars on the screen. And it's so appropriate with what you were doing, Brendan. Just to go back to the chat, the questions again, we have Charles Smith and a question for PJ. PJ, any particular suggestions to minimizing the impact on clouds on astrophotography? He says, I did a couple of long exposure photos of Jupiter and Mars conjunction on the 20th of March 2021 and ended up very smeared. Any advice?
Well, is he referring to the clouds streaking, or is he referring to like an accumulation of the light pollution on the clouds? Do you know? Because if it's the first, usually you could end up kind of having a slightly shorter kind of exposure time for your images, boosting the ISO to some certain degree. Some cameras are kind of what's known as ISO invariant, so you don't actually have to boost it up as high. You can kind of do that whenever you're bringing it into your photo editor of choice. But I don't know, like I think probably one of the most easiest ways of actually kind of reducing the pollution side of things would probably be kind of just to desaturate that particular color, so it's not as distracting in the image, but there's no real way to actually get rid of it. There are kind of light pollution filters, which again you can go out and buy, but realistically that's just one particular wavelength that they've kind of manufactured into the filter itself, which is only really doing something that a piece of software could do something similar. So that's probably my best advice in that regard. But like for my own work, you know, I tend to try and like reduce the amount of opportunities or attempts at shooting anything towards an easterly direction, because especially if you're based on the West Coast, even if you look at Dark Site Finder, you'll see an incredibly progressive buildup of light pollution that ultimately kind of emanates at its brightest point in the heart of Dublin. So again, if you're trying to kind of plan some of your shots to incorporate less light pollution in it, I would certainly, take the time to actually plan where, in his instance, the conjunction was occurring, possibly later into the night towards the west, if his said location isn't in such an urban environment.
Thank you. I see there's a few nods from the ladies at Lumens as well there, so probably in agreement. We have another question for you, PJ, before you're not off the hook yet. So would you have any tips for beginners getting started in astrophotography?
Yeah, I mean, basically get yourself, a half decent tripod. It's going to be the fundamental really for kind of doing any form of astrophotography. Even on kind of more beginner based cameras, as long as you have a longer exposure time of approximately anywhere between 20 to 30 seconds, use a lens which has a large aperture, which is counterintuitive when you think of it. A large aperture is a smaller number. So if you can get anything between a 1.4 to a 2.8 lens, that'll give you an idea of the minimum sort of requirements, because that just basically means that there's more light being let in on your camera's sensor. And then kind of probably at a bare minimum, you'd want to use an ISO of approximately 1600. 3200 is probably the norm in that regard. So basically a tripod is your best friend in that regard. And yeah, try and utilize the website DarkSide Finder to try and find something as like a dark enough region, either as close as possible to you, or certainly try and get out further west and away from major urban centers will certainly help things out.
So we'll pop that website in the chat as well. So Dark Sky Site Finder, and also lightpollutionmap.info is a good one for checking out areas of light pollution. Thanks PJ. Just a couple of others. Let me throw one to. Let me just see. Margaret says, do you think there's any? Sorry, do you think that there is increasing awareness of light pollution? So let me put that to Melanie.
Yeah, I would say that there would be increasing knowledge of light pollution. I think it's more obvious to people who are living in cities like London, I guess. But yeah, maybe also Rebecca would be well placed to say something about that as well.
Sorry, I was just responding to a question in the comment in the chat. What was that question, Georgia?
It was just, do you think the awareness of light pollution is now increasing?
I think so. I think, I mean, I've been doing a lot of research in like sort of most recently in specialist communities, but I think sort of in recent conversations about safety and nighttime, I think it's sort of coming much more to the fore and foregrounded in people's sort of understanding of how they experience different places. I've been working on a project for an exhibition in Birmingham called Insecurity, looking at sort of notions of safety at nighttime. And I think cycling around Birmingham with a GoPro, you definitely feel, it's a different experience to lots of other places that I've been observing, like Epping Forest or other places local to me. But yeah, I think the response I've had from that has definitely shown me that awareness of light pollution and the amount of street lights and the duration of the street lights is definitely, people's knowledge of that is definitely increasing.
I think that's an opportune moment to just plug our national event that we have on Monday for anyone that is interested in raising awareness of light pollution and promoting dark skies. So Monday, the 12th at 7 o'clock, there's a Dark Sky Ireland, and it's not just an Ireland centred event. So we have Betty Meyer from the International Dark Sky Association joining us to speak about advocacy and raising awareness. So thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. Just what do we have next? Melanie, again, Christine Mifsud asks if Melanie could speak about her interest in working with, now I'm going to get this all wrong, daguerreotype techniques.
Yeah, so daguerreotype is the first, one of the first ever photographic processes that was invented by Louis Daguerre in the 1840s. And it's a photograph that's made on silver. So originally it was made with a silver plate, and you used mercury and iodine to make the plate sensitive to light. And then you expose that to light either in a camera or using a negative. And in recent years, I've experimented with using the daguerreotype process without the mercury. So without the mercury, it takes a little bit longer, but it's still possible to make an image. And this is called a Becquerel daguerreotype. So what I'm planning to do in my latest project is to reclaim silver from fixative using electrolysis, and then use that silver plate or copper plated silver, no, silver plated copper to make a daguerreotype. So there's this cyclical process of silver being used and then recaptured and then used again. So trying to make a circular economy using the silver and not use virgin silver, if that makes sense.
Very sustainable. Thank you. Let's see if there's any others. So we have a couple. Has any of your research explored the physical and mental health benefits of engaging in nocturnal activities in naturally dark places? So we might put that to Louise.
Well, actually, one of the first Lumen, I think it was the second Lumen exhibition, was inspired by a book called The End of Night by Paul Bogard. It was the first exhibition that we curated in the church upstairs of our crypt in about 2015. And in his book, he talks about the damaging effects of living in artificial night, so in artificial light at nighttime. So he talks a lot about how night shift workers are prone to getting different types of illnesses later in life from not being exposed to natural darkness during the night, which, yeah, that was a really fascinating kind of insight. Personally, for me, the benefit of sitting and looking out into the stars is just huge for my mental health, and I'm sure for my you know, that has a big impact on my physical health as well. Yeah, I just think it's completely life-altering to spend time looking out into the night sky, and particularly to be looking out from a forest into the night sky, which is my favorite thing to do, I think.
That's great. Well, we can't necessarily promise you forestry on Clare Island, but we can promise the dark skies. So Brendan, any thoughts yourself? You're listening very quietly there.
Well, you know, I must say, I'm fascinated. I didn't know what to expect. You know, it's been really, really interesting. And I do very much like that sort of sense of, I worked for a long time in environmental law, and I worked with indigenous peoples and traveled, you know, in the Amazon, over the hills, and coming up from the Amazon into the Andes, and the skies there were incredible as well. But you know, in the Andes, the people talk about the Apus. That's the gods of the mountains, and they have a link to the stars. You know, a good friend of mine down there, his son died at his own hand, young, and I remember his father, you know, what he was sort of saying was like that, you know, this is just a young person going earlier. And they would still sort of say that, you know, that the stars in their sort of thing were like spirits. But it's just, yeah, there's something I think that we've kind of lost, and that I found again when I went and I worked with Indigenous peoples, and it was the link to the land. And I suppose maybe it's the link to the stars as well. And, you know, and that would be very prevalent. I noticed you had this out in the Northern Territory in Australia, where I had traveled as well with it. And when you go out there, you know, there's no there's no light in some of these places. And you're just sort of sitting there with people, and you have these links. And there's something very, very special about this and about this time. You know, and it fascinates me what you're doing and the work that you're doing there. And, you know, I was listening to that, you know, these curating these activities, especially in London. And I was thinking, is there a lot of interest there? And it may be, one is that people have lost the link because they can't, because of the light pollution. But there's so many other ways we've lost the link. There's an indigenous people in Colombia, and they have two different levels in the community, and one of them, that's sort of the teachers, they call them the mamas, and they are actually trained for years when they're young in astrology. And then they are the ones who become they're sort of the guides for the community. And so they live, then they bring up the young people who are going to be the mamas in houses where they just get to see out through the roof to the night sky. And this is part of their training. So I think there's something really, really, really special there, and something, this movement is part of that whole thing of changing the way we relate to the world and perhaps to our whole thing. So I compliment you all on the work that you're doing. And I will throw an invitation that sort of, if you're coming to Mayo, come on out here. You know, let's see if we can get an installation out here from you. And I wanted to ask PJ there, and PJ may have had a question for our guests from Lumen.
Yeah, well, obviously with your kind of photographic kind of implementation, are you going to specific areas to include that, or does it tend to be as is for each of the projects that you're doing?
So I'll answer that first. So for me, to take photographs of the stars, I do tend to go to dark sky locations to try and find places that are as far away from large populations as possible. So I've been to, as part of my Ancient Light project, I've been to Italy, Ireland, Spain, and lots of other places that are far away from light pollution.
Okay.
Are we each answering? I think so.
That's open to the floor.
Okay. So the project that I mentioned before, where I was at Hiniwai Reserve to do the birdsong recording, was unusually a time where I wasn't thinking about the night sky, and I wasn't thinking about astrophotography. And I was really rushed on this very quick residency there. And that was the kind of most amazing thing, is that I didn't go to this really dark part of New Zealand for the night sky. I went for the to do field recording. And so when the sun set and this, you know, the stars started to become visible, it was like surprising and completely overwhelming, because I wasn't thinking about it at all for this first time in my life, you know. So I guess I don't go places specifically for that, but where I go ends up being dark places anyway.
One point I was actually going to make, which I forgot to kind of mention, is I kind of remember being, as a child, you know, particularly in the winter times, whenever it's already dark by 5 p.m. And if you're kind of walking to one of your other friends' house in the island, especially whenever there's not a moon in the sky at all, is just how easy and how fast you get used to how dark it is and how your eyes kind of adjust quite well. And I've always found that in other sort of rural locations around Ireland anyway, if I was visiting people, and it also happened to be somewhat of a kind of a non-light polluted kind of area, or a little less anyway, that most others would kind of tend to like reach for a torch or something like that immediately, where I was just so used to kind of relying on my eyesight. Not that it's any good, but you know, it's definitely something that I always been, you know, very aware of into my kind of, particularly coming into my early 20s, whenever I kind of was developing the landscape photography even further and gaining even more of an interest in astrophotography particularly. So, you know, I can understand that, like, once you kind of realize it's there properly and you can take the time to notice it, like I mentioned towards the start of the webinar, you know, just on the way home from a visit to a friend's house up near the mill, which is towards the center part of the island where there's like no light pollution at all, and seeing the stars in the sky, I kind of just had to stop, you know, on the road, kind of lie down to the side of the road, actually look up the stars, because it was so fascinating. And, you know, for most people, it can be obviously very humbling in that regard. So I think whoever asked about kind of the benefits for mental health is certainly there for that. But yeah.
PJ, I've just popped up a poll there. I just thought it was a relevant time to put it up. So for those folks that would like to vote on it, we are asking, how does seeing stars on a clear night make you feel? So we are giving options: excited, scared, full of wonder, or other. And we've just for the last few seconds now, because we're going to have to wrap it up, unfortunately. It's been a lovely, lovely evening, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank the three ladies from Lumen, Louise, Melanie and Rebecca, so much for joining us. And a very special thank you to Brendan and PJ for being fantastic hosts. I think this will be the first of many dark sky events that Clare Island will host. So we are very happy to have you on board in the dark sky family, and we look forward to visiting in person. And I'm glad to see Fiona's put her camera on there, so I'm going to pop her into the spotlight here, because Fiona's our Mayo Dark Sky Festival director. And
hi guys.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry to gate crash, but I just couldn't let the evening go by without congratulating a very humble lady there on the panel, and that's Georgia, who has recently been appointed to the International Committee of the International Dark Sky Association. And knowing Georgia, she would never have mentioned it. So Georgia, I have the bottle of champagne ready for the next time that we meet.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And I believe you're the only representative, I think, from Ireland. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, I am, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it, if you don't mind.
But on that point, I'll tell you, just one of the main things we're charged with doing is to collect the views from the international regions. There's 6 continents represented, so I'm in very good company. We have a survey that we are asking as many people as possible to contribute to for their needs as a dark sky advocate, dark sky representative. So if I might just, if I can get it quickly enough, I might pop it in the chat in a second. And if you could maybe take it away with you and comment on the survey, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much, Fiona. You're very, very kind.
Congratulations.
No, great. Folks, I'd love to share the results of our poll. So let's just have a look at that to see. So I think that's a lovely result. 92% of those who voted said their experience makes them feel full of wonder. So we have 19% excited, we have 2% scared, and 4% other. So the fact that we have 92% full of wonder at seeing a clear night sky, is probably a lovely way to end this evening. And I'm just going to pop that survey in the chat box. And I'm going to just remind you all that tomorrow evening we have another island. We move to Achill Island, and we will be joined by Dr. Frank Prendergast talking about mountains, mysteries and megaliths, and he has a very exciting talk for us tomorrow evening, so please join us if you can. And look, thank you very much to everyone. I'm going to take a quick screenshot, so give us a wave, folks who don't mind. Great. And thank you to all who joined us tonight, and have a great evening. We hope to see you later on in Dark Sky Week. Thank you to Fiona for all your help in managing the questions and the chat, and have a great evening, folks. So
we'd just like to sort of say thank you very much for visiting us on Clare Island. It's been illuminating, and we look forward to meeting you here on Clare Island next time round. Thanks very much.
That's it.
Good night.
Thank you.